we talk about human rights groups urging the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights to take decisive action against Egypt after years of deepening repression and shrinking civic space. 22 organizations say both the Egyptian government and the Commission's own reports have failed to acknowledge key violations, even as the Commission itself has found Cairo in breach of multiple articles of the African Charter. Despite a near total crackdown on independent voices and a severe deterioration in rights protections, the Commission has not issued a resolution on Egypt in a decade, a silence critics say can no longer continue. And we speak to one of those, Amr Magdi, a senior researcher in the Middle East and North Africa division of Human Rights Watch. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Amr, can you hear us?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So the African Commission, as you say, not adopting a resolution on Egypt since 2015, despite acknowledging these breaches of the African Charter. What in your assessment explains not only the prolonged institutional silence, but what should it really have done at this point?
Well, we have struggled actually as human rights groups to bring attention to the dire and prolonged human rights crisis in Egypt, not just within the African system, to be honest, but also even, for example, with the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And for example, the Human Rights Council in Geneva issued two resolutions on Egypt, on the human rights situation in Egypt in 2014, 2021. The African Commission issued 4 resolutions. I think there must be more attention to the situation in Egypt, not just in terms of adopting new resolutions highlighting the serious and systematic abuses, but also to establish follow-up mechanisms. Egypt recently was being reviewed last month by the Commission for the period between 2019 and 2024. And despite the drastic deterioration of human rights in so many aspects during that time, there was actually 6 final decisions by the African Commission as well, adopted 3 of them during that time, the period of the review. And still Egypt didn't really implement those decisions, which should warrant normally strong follow-up mechanisms or even referral to the African Union Executive Council to address these, non-compliance by Egypt. This hasn't been done, and we as human rights groups are raising the alarm bells and saying that there should be more concrete follow-up on the human rights situation in Egypt. There are many reasons why this attention has not been given and this follow-up has not been done. One of them is because Egypt is a big country within the African Union, and there has been a lot of attempts by the Egyptian government over the past several years to actually weaken the independence of the African Commission and let's say water down the human rights language in several mechanisms. So they have been playing a damaging role within the African Union. They have been able to affect, unfortunately, other African governments because at the end of the day, African Commission is composed and receives its fund from the African Union. The commissioners are usually, in most cases, nominated by their own governments. So all of that affects, let's say, the strengths of the Commission.
Just in terms of your own pronouncements that Egypt's civic space is near completely destroyed, but the fact that a lot of those critical abuses are being overlooked because there is no full disclosure of those human rights abuses. Can you just share with us the ground level indicators that you monitor, what you're finding, and how Egypt is able to obfuscate some of those incidents?
So in terms of what the brave work that the Egyptian human rights organizations have been able to do under severe repression since 2013, 2014, when the military coup happened, and when President Sisi became president in 2014. Since that time, oppression has only become worse and worse. We have seen Egypt being ranked among the top 10 worst countries in terms of the number of jailed journalists. And this count is done by organizations like Reporters Without Borders and Committee to Protect Journalists. Just this year, the official press syndicate in Egypt said that there are at least 24 journalists behind bars in Egypt. Egypt has also become, under Sisi's government, one of the top 10 worst countries in terms of the numbers of death penalty, death sentences, and executions, sometimes just right after China and Iran in some years since 2014. So we have on so many indicators. Also, when we look at social and economic rights, we see the lowest budget allocated for education in over a decade, even compared to the first 2 or 3 years under Sisi's government. Oppression has gone harder and worse. And this flow of information, and the main reason why we are still able to report, is because of the brave efforts by Egyptian human rights defenders. Of course, some of them had, or the majority of them had to flee the country and they operate in exile. But still, some of them operate inside the country. They have offered huge sacrifices in order to continue doing the brave work that they are doing. International organizations are also able to document and speak up about the situation. And it's almost just human rights community that has been able to show resilience and to survive this oppression. When we look at political groups, for example, they have been completely either destroyed, taken to prison, forced into exile, or co-opted by the government. Unfortunately, as well, many of the professional syndicates have been co-opted by the government. But when it comes to the human rights movement, there has been a lot of tools and mechanisms to overcome this severe oppression and to continue do the work and to continue report on the situation. And it's a battle that the government has lost. They spend millions of dollars on PR campaign, public relation campaigns in major Western capitals, and they basically hire firms as well to do lobbying and advocacy on behalf of the government to augment government propaganda. However, they have not been able to actually whitewash Egypt's image in international media, in international organizations, basically. And that's why it is important for regional mechanisms in Africa, like the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, to pick up on this work, brave work done by independent human rights groups and defenders in Egypt, and to scrutinize government's narrative when presented to the Commission. At the very minimum, government narrative should not be accepted on its face and should be really deeply scrutinized.
And we really do appreciate your time, and I think it does deserve a wider discussion. But thank you so much for speaking to us about this. Amr Magdi, a senior researcher in the Middle East and North Africa Division on Human Rights Watch, calling on regional institutions on the region and globally to take Egypt to task over its human rights trajectory, as well as the need for more transparent reporting.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.